Let's take a look at some of these polls. New Quinnipiac University polls show the president's approval rating has dropped 4 points in their poll since last week, down to 35%. 59% disapprove of the job he's doing. 31% of voters feel President Trump is doing more to unite the country, down 5 points from after his first 100 days in April. 62% say he's doing more to divide the country. 45% say Trump is bringing the wrong type of change. That's up from 2 points in April. 30% feel it is the right type of change, down 4 points. 23% say there's been little change at all. And voters are against the way Trump talks about the media by a nearly 2-to-1 margin. 35% approve, 62% disapprove. At the same time, 40% approve of the media's coverage of Trump, while 55% disapprove. Shannon, does Donald Trump care about those numbers? I mean, he doesn't appear to with the way he conducts himself.
I think they care about the numbers for the base. That's what I'm told. And they feel like the base is holding steady. There's been, among Republicans as a whole, you see some drop in support from Republicans, but it's still pretty good. It's still around that 75% mark. So if you're looking at 2018, a primary, and you're trying to primary someone like Jeff Flake, is the base solid? Is the base going to go after our establishment opponents in Congress? That's what they care about at this point, because, I mean, a lot can happen between now and 3.5 years from now.
Carol, let's go to you on this question. The president obviously has been back and forth with his rhetoric all week, and that's some of the up and down. But if you look at the poll numbers, as Shannon said, 75–80% of Republicans still with him. He feels like, from what he hears when he goes to a rally in Phoenix, that he's still got his people with him.
That's right. And he also, we've talked about this, over and over again. He feels like what worked for him during the campaign would work for him now. I think if you look at, some of this has to do with just the different audiences that the president is in front of. He had a script at that rally, and he just chose to veer from it. And part of that is because he's in this rally and he feeds off the crowd, and it energizes him and takes him back to the campaign, and he feels much freer to air these grievances. If you contrast that with his audience on Monday, which were military members, where he's announcing a policy for Afghanistan, that's very different. And yesterday it was the American Legion, veterans. It's a very different audience. But anyone who thinks that this is a president who sits around and thinks about unity and really mulls over those issues when in his private time, is mistaken. He's clearly someone who sits around and thinks about who's against him, who's doing things that are unfair to him. And when he gets into that arena that's very campaign-like, that's when he feels free to unleash.
And Mark Halperin, he also focuses on those polls. He's obsessed with polls. He's obsessed with bringing people to his side. But right now, it's just the base. And it's so interesting, we're talking about the White House saying, well, we're just focused about the base. We're just focused about the base. We've all talked about, and everybody's been talking about, how the bar has been so lowered for Donald Trump, the expectations for Donald Trump. I really think, other than behavior and temperament and well-being, I think we need to add polling to that. Everybody looks at the polls and his base is staying with him, the Trump people do. Well, he's at like 35% right now. And you had his own pollster going out yesterday bragging about a poll that showed that 42% of Republicans were sure they would vote for him for re-election. That is absolutely astounding. He's 7 months in, and only 42% of the Republican Party is sure they would vote for Donald Trump in a re-elect. It's never been that low for any incumbent president ever. And yet, Mark, they were out yesterday bragging about that, which shows you how pathetic their narrow standing has come because of this Steve Bannon focus and Donald Trump focus on narrowcasting and the base.
The thing that I don't have my arms around, is I've been trying, is do people in the White House think they've convinced the president that he needs to change course? He switched chiefs of staff. He switched press secretary. They're looking for a full-time communications director. But if you look at the events this week, even the speech yesterday with the different tone, there's not a fundamental sense that the president has accepted the notion that things are bad, that things need to change. And if you asked lobbyists, members of Congress, academics, many people who work in the White House, other cabinet members, they'd say things need to change. We can't go into September with the same battle plan that we had for the last 7 months, and yet people doubt whether the president has accepted that when you have things like citing polls and having the rally he had in Phoenix, which suggests he just wants to do more of the same.
Joe, I'm sorry, go ahead, sir.
Go ahead, Donnie.
Yeah,
no, you go.
I think, and I'm not going to your point earlier, I'm not going to do any pop psychology, but we have to stop looking for logic, I will say that, and stop looking for any form of logical explanation and just accept, at best I will use the word illogical. There's you know, that's the thing that is so hard. Joe, I was watching you actually yesterday morning, and you looked tired. I'm not saying that just because you are a handsome man and you always will be a handsome man, but it gets to a point where you can't get your arms around it anymore, and you can't. There are no chess pieces to move to go and the only explanation is a explanation about him as a human being. It has nothing to do with policy. It has nothing to do with strategy. It has to do with a 70-year-old, 1-year-old man in a particular state of mind. And that's the analysis to do.
Well, but the thing is, it may not be that he has pre-dementia. It may not be that he has some disorder. It may just be that Donald Trump says, this has worked for me for 40, 45 years. If Rosie O'Donnell says something negative about me, I will go crazy, and I will be so inappropriate, and I will attack her, and I will attack her physical appearance, and I will be abusive to her. And if, I don't know who else did, I didn't follow it that closely, but if somebody else in popular culture does that, I will attack them. When people do work for me, instead of paying them like a decent human being, I will hire lawyers, and I won't pay their bills, and I will make them drag me to court, and I will show absolutely no class. I will show no dignity. I will try to take every advantage of every person I can, and then you start running for president. You attack war heroes. You attack Megyn Kelly. You attack, I mean, just go down the line. You call beauty queens fat. You attack mothers whose sons gave their lives in Iraq, Gold Star mothers. Please don't forget the Pope. You attack all of these people, and you attack the Pope, and you win, right? And so, but he won for a series of reasons that will never, and friends, listen to me at home, they will never repeat themselves again, okay? That is never, ever going to happen again. You could have run the election 100 times in 100 different days. That was the only day Donald Trump would have won. So, Donnie, the mistake he makes is, and by the way, he even said that before to me once. If the election were held a week before, I would have lost. And if it were held a week after, I probably would have lost. But on that day, I won. And yet, he's relearning all the wrong lessons and projecting them out. And that's why you have Joe Biden. That's why you have Bernie Sanders. That's why you have guys that are beating him by 20 points, 15, 20 points in these general election matchups. That's why Mitch McConnell's going, I don't need this guy. This guy's a loser. This guy's a loser. He's at 35%. Yeah, I may be at 18% in Kentucky, but you know what? I can take care of Kentucky. He can't fix this. And that's what Donald Trump doesn't understand. So they continue narrowcasting, and they're riding it off a cliff. But Donnie, it may just be that he says acting boorish has worked for me very well for 45 years.
But him not being able to
why stop now?
Therein lies the behavioral deviancy, to not be able to see the space he's in right now and cognitively understand that even selfishly is not working for him. Forget what's right for the country. There in and of itself is, to me, the behavioral deficiency.
Well, it's a deficiency. There's no doubt about that. But Willie Geist, the question is whether he will be able to adjust and adapt and change behavioral patterns of 40, 45 years that actually helped him in the rough and tumble of a sort of bonfire of the vanities culture, where you could slug it out between the New York Post and the New York Daily News. That's the world that, I mean, that's still his mindset.
I think it's a pretty simple answer. as to whether or not he can change his behavior. No. No. I mean, he's had all this time during the campaign. He's had 7 months as president to change. I think waiting for the pivot that people used to talk about during the campaign
we haven't heard that
is
word
foolish.
In a long time.
Remember the
old pivot word?
There's going to be no pivot. Let's just say what we all know. Tuesday night in Phoenix was Donald Trump.
Correct.
Last night and yesterday at the American Legion in Reno was a guy playing president, doing what he thought a president should do, reading off a teleprompter, listening for that day anyway to General Kelly or whoever the advisor was who got into his ear. But the difference, Joe, is you say, just spreading your fire out indiscriminately when you're a candidate that worked for him, but when you're president of the United States, when you go after Mitch McConnell, when you go after Bob Corker, when you call up Tom Tillis and ask him to not, co-sponsor the law with Chris Coons about Bob Mueller, do all these things that Politico's reporting this morning, those are the people you need to become a great president. If he wants to succeed, he needs all those people, so he shouldn't be firing indiscriminately at them.
And Willie, that's what we were talking about yesterday, what didn't make sense. And what I don't understand why Trump supporters don't even get this is everything that he is doing is hurting his agenda, hurting his efforts to pass tax reform, to pass regulatory reform, to overturn Obamacare, to do all the things that he wants to do. When he attacks all of these people, he's just shooting himself in the foot politically. And it makes absolutely no sense, and yet he just keeps doing it.
Unless two things. One is, Joe, that assumes his agenda is a traditional agenda to govern. If his agenda is to portray himself as an outsider running against the Republican establishment as much as the Democratic establishment, it would help explain some things. The other issue is talking about the pivot. History suggests that the only successful presidents are presidents who do pivot. There's a famous story where Truman said Eisenhower would never succeed because he would think the presidency was like the army. He'd order people to do things and they wouldn't do it. But Eisenhower succeeded as president because he adjusted. George W. Bush adjusted in his later years. And I think the question you're getting at, does Donald Trump learn that what worked for him to get him to the White House won't help him succeed in the White House? Unless history suggests, unless he makes that understanding, that transition, he will fail as president.
And Carol Lee, inside the White House, is there any hope, Carol Lee, that that General Kelly can bring any order, or have they already given up on that?
No, I don't think they've given up on that. But, General Kelly came into a really difficult job. This is a White House that is structured in a way that we haven't seen. And I think you've seen him really try to focus on the process and implementing a process and making sure there's the paper flow and the people who are coming in and out of the Oval Office, and really focus on things that he can control. And the idea that he can control the president is just he can't. And I think he knows that to a certain extent. And so the focus seems to have been on the staff and how to create an apparatus around him that is at least functioning in a way that can try to move the president's agenda forward. The president's heading into this fall where there's a number of very serious legislative issues that he's going to have to deal with in Congress. What must do is not, health care or tax reform, although he would like that. Things like raising the debt limit and, funding the government. And this rift with Congress, which is already, you see Republicans already kind of tuning him out. How that plays out is really going to depend on how he engages with them this fall. And I think there's some hope, at least on the Hill, that General Kelly will make that process go a little more smoothly than we've seen so far, but we just don't know yet.
Shannon, hold that thought. We're going to get to you right after this break. Still ahead on Morning Joe, Democratic Congressman Tim Ryan says maybe the country needs somebody from a place like Youngstown, Ohio. And he said that in New Hampshire. The potential presidential contender joins us ahead. Also, the man who helped compile that infamous dossier about President Trump and Russia testified for 10 hours on Capitol Hill. Will those transcripts now go public? We'll ask a member of the Judiciary Committee. Senator Dick Blumenthal of Connecticut is with us in studio. You're watching Morning Joe. We'll be right back.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.